Said that you've been hurt one too many times before. Ended up staring in the bathroom mirror, crying on your bedroom floor. Baby, you can take my word, you haven't gotta hurt no more. Things about to get much better. I wanna make this forever. I wanna make this forever. Said that you felt lost 100 times before, going in circles on a one-way street, running till your feet get sore. Well, I guess you haven't heard, you ain't got around no more. Things about to get much better, so I wanna make this forever. I wanna make this forever.
Hey there! This is a review of the 7artisans 50mm t2.0 Spectrum lens. All the footage that you just saw was shot on that lens with the Sony FX3. Disclaimer here, 7artisans sent me this lens to test out a while ago, and I apologize for not reviewing it sooner because it's pretty awesome. And of course, they don't get to see this video before it goes out and they have no influence in what I say here. So, I do want to say right off the bat that this is a cinema lens, so there is no autofocus whatsoever. It's completely manual. But before you click off, this has an amazing price and produces a really cool image, so you may want to stick around and learn about this lens. I also want to talk for a moment before getting into the review about the importance of manual focus. Now, I shoot a mixture of autofocus and manual focus depending on what I'm doing. If I'm filming myself, I'm usually using autofocus, but a lot of times when I'm out shooting B-roll and stuff like that, I'm using manual focus. And I think it's an important skill to learn, but one thing that's a benefit of when you're shooting with manual focus is it forces you to slow down as a filmmaker and makes you be more intentional with all of your shots. And when you force yourself to use manual focus, you'll see what I'm talking about, and it's a good learning experience. Now, all of us can shoot with manual focus on our autofocus lenses, right? You can take your lens and you can flip the little switch over there to go from autofocus to manual focus. But let's be real here. If it has autofocus, most of us are using that on a regular basis. The other thing that's cool about using a fully manual lens is how they actually work. So when you use an RF lens or an E-mount lens or any of these, autofocus lenses, when you turn the focus on the lens, it doesn't actually focus the lens. It talks to the camera, and then the camera tells the lens what to do. So there's no mechanical coupling between the focus ring and the focus. So there's a little bit of a disconnect, and I think it can be a little bit challenging to learn manual focus with a lens like that. Now, if you're using a lens like this, a cinema lens or a fully manual lens, when you turn the focus ring here, it actually turns the focus in the lens. So it's very accurate and has a very satisfying feeling to it. And it's a way better way of shooting manual focus. So all of our autofocus lenses are what's known as focus by wire. And if you're actually shooting with manual focus, I recommend a mechanically coupled manual focus lens. The other difference is with this is a cinema lens, so it has the gearings on here for aperture and focus. So if you're using a follow focus or a focus motor, you definitely have that. One point about this review is I'm gonna have a slightly different approach to this because generally a lot of my reviews are very, very technical. And the reason for this is I just wanna get out and shoot more and to focus more on how the images look. And I encourage all of you to get out and shoot as much as possible. So as I said, not super technical, not gonna see test charts, but you'll get a good idea of the lens and whether or not you should consider it. So let's start by talking about sharpness and overall image quality. Now you got a good sense from the intro in this video what the lens looks like, and that's why I opened with that because I wanted you to really see what the lens looks like. In my opinion, this lens is kind of a mix between vintage and modern. And let me explain what I mean by that. So it is not clinically sharp, and I'm not saying it's not sharp, I'm just saying it's not super, super sharp like a lot of the modern lenses are. Now this image has a different look and feel than the modern lenses like the G Masters, the RFL lenses, even the Sigma lenses. These are made to be technically perfect as possible, and the lens manufacturers try to remove as many faults and flaws. Now when we're looking at vintage lenses and we're interested in shooting with lenses like that, we're looking for it to have character, and what that means is faults and flaws. So things like distortion, chromatic aberrations, flaring, stuff like that. Now, This lens is kind of a mixture of that. It has a really pleasant image. I think it has amazing colors. And when you have a lens that's a little bit less sharp, it's also really great for shooting people. It really smooths out the skin, and frankly, it just makes people look better. And a lot of times when you're shooting with really sharp lenses, people add diffusion filters on the front of their lenses to get a softer look and try to cover up blemishes and stuff like that on whoever you're interviewing or filming. It also has really pleasing bokeh, and I found it to be really interesting and very smooth and has lots of textures and colors to it. So I really do like the bokeh on this lens. So overall image quality, I would say it's not super sharp like you'll see in a lot of modern lenses, but I'll talk about later that it doesn't have a lot of the flaws that I was talking about earlier. So overall, I'd say the image is really pleasing, and the fact that it is a little bit less sharp than some of these super sharp modern lenses, in my opinion, is awesome because it gives it a little bit of character. But what I mean by it's a mixture of vintage and modern is that it really does well with a lot of the other faults and flaws, which we'll get into. The first flaw to talk about here is going to be chromatic aberrations, and I really didn't notice much when I was out shooting. I wanted to push the lens a little bit and see what it could do, so I pointed up at the sky, and for the first shot here was at T2.0, which it was definitely a little bit overexposed here because I didn't have a strong enough ND filter. I think you see just a little bit of purple fringing here, but it's really not that bad. Stopping down to T4, I'd say it's completely gone, and here's a look at T8 as well. You can see that the chromatic aberrations are pretty limited on this lens. In terms of longitudinal chromatic aberration, I went and shot this fence just to see if I could find some, and you have to really look for it in terms of that purple and green fringing, either in front of or behind the focal plane. It's really minor, and as I said before, I didn't really see it when I was out shooting, so in general, the chromatic aberrations were really controlled in this lens. Next, let's talk about flaring. Now, when you're looking at vintage lenses and some cinema lenses, they often have some really unique flaring, which can be a desired characteristic if that's what you're looking for. But as I said, with this lens, it's got a lot of modern features, and the flaring is very well controlled. Now, there are two general types of flaring. There's ghosting and veiling. So veiling flare is sort of a glowing look where you have a loss of contrast. It sort of washes over the image. I got it in this shot here, and I thought it looks really cool, but I had to really force it though. And when I did try to go out and shoot up at the sky, again, I could get it to have some veiling flares, but it was very well controlled. The next is ghosting flare, and that's when you sort of see a string of images on the screen that's coming from the lens. And you can see it in this tree example here, and I have to say that, again, it's pretty well controlled, but I really do like the look of the ghosting flares. And then when I tried to force it here by pointing up at the sun, as I said, it's also really well controlled. In terms of the colors, I was getting green and purple with a little bit of orange at the extreme. So overall, the flaring was really well controlled on this lens. In terms of focus breathing, this lens definitely has some. It's not terrible, but I was hoping for a little bit better performance being a cinema lens. Next, let's talk about build quality and the features of the lens. So first of all, it has an all metal construction. It is pretty heavy and feels very well made. Starting out on the front here, we have a metal lens cap, which slides over the top of it, which is really nice. You can see that the front element is a little bit recessed here. We have an 82mm filter thread. On the back, we have an all metal mount, as you'd expect, no weather sealing. Now on the side of the lens here, we have our focus and aperture. And I have to say that they're very smooth, and they're also geared like I mentioned before. So if you want to use a fall focus or a focus motor, you can do that. The focus throw has about a 270-degree throw, which if you're using a follow focus or focus motor is great because you get really accurate throws. But if you are, holding the lens by the barrel, sometimes it can be a lot because you have to move your hand quite a few times to get through the whole focal range. But really, no complaints there. It is very dampened and very smooth. It is nice and stiff, but not too stiff when you're moving it. I have to say that it makes a little bit of sound. But I don't know if that's just my copy or not. This is also the E-mount lens that I have here. As I mentioned before, I shot that on the Sony FX3. But overall, build quality, it is absolutely amazing. It is very heavy duty, and I feel like it'll stand up to quite a bit of use. So next, let's talk about pricing and options. I forgot to mention this earlier, but this is a full frame lens, and hopefully you picked up on that because I was shooting on the Sony FX3, which is a full frame camera. There are 4 different focal lengths available, so I want to talk about that and their prices. So the 12mm is $319, the 35mm is $419, the 50mm is $379, and the 85mm is $459, so very affordable lenses. Now, all of these focal lengths are available in E-mount, L-mount, and Nikon Z-mount. There are some focal lengths available in RF, X, and Micro Four Thirds. I don't know if they're adding more, but that's what's available at the moment. So I just mentioned all the prices, and I didn't get to test out the other lenses in the set, But I do have to say that the price is a really attractive feature of these lenses. And so let me just put this in perspective in terms of the competition. So if you're looking for some more inexpensive cinema lenses, you have lenses like the DZO Film Vespids, which are around $1,400 each. The Micas are like $1,000 to $1,200 each. So these are well below that. So overall, I think they are a great lens for the money, and they produce a really pleasing image, and they're really fun to use. I would say they're going to be great for you to pick up if you want to maybe try out a cinema lens, or maybe just a manual focus lens, or maybe get a different look. Overall, very happy with the lens, and I'm going to be shooting with it more often. Again, big thanks to 7artisans for sending this out for testing. Thank you for watching. Please hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.